He lived alone in the desert, carrying a silence heavier than grief, until one day, a child's cry broke through the wind, and in that moment, something in him stirred, not with words, but with choice. If you've ever believed some losses are too deep to heal, this story just might change your mind. Like and subscribe to follow more stories that reach beyond the surface, into the heart. Because sometimes, family isn't where we're from. It's where we choose to stay. The sun was merciless that day. It bled across the dry New Mexico sky in long, blinding streaks, casting jagged shadows on the cracked earth. Caleb Walker gripped the steering wheel of his old Ford pickup as it rattled down Highway 117, a road so straight and empty, it could have led to nowhere. Or maybe that was the point. He didn't drive far anymore, just from the old pump well near the ridge to the crumbling gas station he called home. 40 miles round trip, enough to keep the water tank full and the dust out of his lungs, enough to remind him that he still existed, even if he wasn't sure why. He hadn't spoken to another human in weeks, didn't need to. 3 years had passed since the night he drove too fast down a rain-slicked road with his pregnant wife beside him, her hand resting on his. A deer jumped. He swerved. The truck flipped. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. The baby never had a name. Since then, Caleb had lived like the land, silent, scorched, and too stubborn to die. That was when he heard it, a sound so faint it could have been the wind. He let off the gas, killed the engine, rolled down the window. Nothing. Just the ticking of the engine cooling, the hum of heat rising off the asphalt. Then it came again, a cry. Soft, human, child. Caleb squinted into the distance. A shimmer of silver metal caught the sunlight. A car, maybe 100 yards off the road, nose down in a patch of sand. He hesitated. Every bone in his body said no, but his feet moved anyway. By the time he reached the vehicle, the crying had grown louder, raw, frantic. The car was a beat-up sedan, its back door flung open, its front wheels buried in sand. A young woman crouched, beside it cradling a small boy no more than 3 in her arms. She looked up as Caleb approached, shielding her eyes from the glare. Her face was flushed, lips dry, hair matted with sweat. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, hoarsely. "The car overheated. My phone has no signal. I just need water. For him." Caleb didn't speak. His eyes flicked to the boy. The child's cheeks were flushed, his small body limp against his mother's chest. "I have some in the truck," he said. His voice startled both of them. It sounded rusted, like something long forgotten. The woman nodded. "Thank you, please." He turned on his heel and walked back to his truck. Every step, a memory. Every breath, a reason not to go back. But when he returned, water bottle in hand, her eyes met his, and he saw it. Not just desperation. Recognition. She knew what it felt like to be on the edge. The boy drank greedily, water spilling down his chin, his eyes barely opened. "He's burning up," she whispered. Caleb studied her more closely now. Mid-30s, maybe younger. There was a gentleness to her features, even beneath the layers of sun and strain. But her hands shook. She wasn't used to being out here. "There's shade at the old station," he said. She blinked. "Is it far?" He shook his head. 5 miles, it's not much, but it's cooler inside." She hesitated. So did he. Then she stood, the boy in her arms, and said, "Thank you." The drive back was silent. She held the boy, Jamie, she later told him, in her lap, rocking him slowly, as if to keep his fever from climbing too high. Caleb focused on the road, though it blurred in places, smeared by the shimmer of heat and the dull ache creeping into his chest. He didn't ask questions. She didn't offer explanations. When they reached the station, she looked around, at the rusted pumps, the sun-bleached Coca-Cola sign, the cracked windows, and said softly, "It's beautiful." He almost laughed. "It's broken," he replied. She smiled anyway. So am I. Caleb opened the door. The inside was cool, at least cooler than outside. The floor was swept, the cot in the corner freshly made. A propane stove sat in the kitchen nook. A battered table stood beneath a dust-covered window. It wasn't home, but it was safe. "You can stay the night," he said, avoiding her gaze. "Just the night," she echoed. He nodded, then added almost grudgingly, "There's soup in the pantry and a fan." She settled Jamie onto the cot, brushing the boy's damp hair off his forehead. Caleb watched from the doorway. Something inside him moved, barely, but enough to be felt. A tremor in old ground. He turned away. Later, as the sun dropped below the horizon and the desert turned gold, he sat on the back steps, staring at the horizon. Behind him he heard quiet humming, a mother's lullaby. The sound floated through the cracked screen door, soft as dust. He closed his eyes. 3 years of silence. 3 years of guilt and ghosts. But today, someone had cried, and he had gone, toward the sound, not away. That had to mean something, didn't it? The desert got quiet after dark. Not silent, never silent, but a kind of hush that pressed in around you. Crickets clicked like loose clock gears. The wind dragged sand against the windows. Somewhere out there, a coyote called once, then again, then nothing. Caleb lay on the old couch, eyes open, arms folded across his chest. The ceiling above him was cracked and water-stained from storms long past. He could hear the fan turning slowly in the other room where she slept, Maya and the boy, Jamie. The child's breathing had softened. Fever down, maybe, or maybe just tired. It should have been enough. It wasn't. Every cell in his body was bracing for something. He'd spent years building walls, and tonight someone had stepped through without knocking. He didn't know how to shut the door again. He sat up and ran a hand down his face. His fingers brushed the scar along his jawline, a burn from the night of the accident. The nerve endings had long since healed. The memories hadn't. In the morning, the desert returned to itself. Harsh, bright, unforgiving. Caleb stepped outside to check the water tank. The air already baked the skin. He worked quickly, methodically. That was his rhythm. Small tasks, done in silence. It kept the noise out. Maya stood in the doorway, holding Jamie on her hip. She looked different in the morning light, less afraid, more tired. He asked for toast, she said. Didn't think he even remembered what that was. "There's bread in the tin," Caleb replied, nodding toward the pantry. "Might still be good." She smiled. It was faint but real. "Thank you for last night." He didn't answer, just nodded and returned to tightening a valve. They ate quietly at the old table. Maya tore tiny pieces of toast for Jamie, who chewed slowly, watching Caleb with wide, curious eyes. The boy didn't speak much. Every sound startled him. Every movement made him shrink back a little. Caleb recognized the signs. Children who'd seen too much didn't act like children. "Your place," Maya said softly. "Used to be a gas station?" "Yeah," he said. "My dad ran it. I used to pump here in high school." She looked around the room. "You've kept it livable." "It doesn't ask much of me." Her eyes lingered on him, trying to read between the lines. Later that day, Maya asked if she could sweep, just to help. Caleb handed her the broom wordlessly. She swept the front steps, then the hallway, then started humming to herself. An old song, maybe. Her voice carried through the dry air like cotton on wind. Caleb tried to focus on repairs in the back shed. The fan was acting up again, and he didn't like the idea of the boy sleeping through another night in heat. But his hands shook more than usual, not from the heat. He didn't want this. He didn't want to care. Because the last time he let someone in, he'd buried her under red desert clay. And yet, every time Maya moved past him, brushing close with a soft "excuse me," every time Jamie reached out and touched the leg of his chair just to know he was still there, something in him cracked a little more. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He stood by the window in the kitchen, mug in hand, watching the moonlight drift across the sand, Maya stepped in quietly, barefoot, wrapped in a worn blanket. She didn't speak at first, just stood beside him. "I used to watch the sky when I couldn't sleep," she murmured. "Pretend the stars were lights in a city where no one could hurt me." Caleb looked at her, at the dark smudges beneath her eyes, the way she held herself, like someone who'd learned to live small to survive. He didn't ask. He didn't need to. "He said he'd kill us if I left," she said after a while. Her voice was steady. "Said he'd make sure no one would ever help us again." Caleb didn't move, "But I left anyway," she continued. "I had to. Jamie was starting to flinch every time the door slammed. I couldn't let him grow up thinking that was love." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the wind outside, moving through brittle weeds. Finally, Caleb set down his mug and said quietly, "I lost my wife, and our baby. I was driving. We were on our way to the hospital. A deer jumped the road." Maya's breath hitched, almost imperceptibly. "She died before the ambulance came." He said, "Baby didn't make it either." She turned toward him slowly. Her eyes shimmered in the moonlight, not with pity, but something gentler, something closer to knowing. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Caleb shook his head. "It wasn't your fault." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Neither was it yours." He looked down at his scarred hands. "I built a world where no one else could get in, and now you're here." "I didn't mean to intrude." "You didn't," he said, then added with a breath that felt like surrender, "You just reminded me it's still possible to feel something." Maya blinked. Her eyes didn't leave his. "I'm not asking for anything," she said softly. "We just needed somewhere to breathe." "You can stay," he said, before he could stop himself. "For a while?" He nodded. "For as long as you need." They stood there in the kitchen, not touching, not speaking, but somehow connected. Not by hope, not yet, but by wounds. And the quiet miracle of someone who didn't run away. The next morning brought wind, not the dry gusts that peeled paint off the walls, but a softer breeze that rustled the sparse trees near the waterline and whistled gently through the screen. Caleb woke to the sound of quiet laughter. It startled him. Laughter didn't belong here, not in this place, not in this house. But there it was, light as bird wings, Jamie, giggling over something his mother had said. Then Maya's voice, hushed and sweet, wrapping around the child's joy like a blanket. Caleb didn't move. He stayed in bed longer than usual, listening. There was something dangerous about the sound of hope. It had a way of sneaking in, turning ordinary walls into promises. He couldn't afford promises, not again. But when he finally stepped into the kitchen, there was a plate already waiting for him. Toast, 2 eggs, coffee, strong and black. Not fancy, not perfect, but made for him. He blinked. "I figured," Maya said, not looking up from where she was wiping down the table. "If I'm staying a little while, I might as well be useful." Caleb sat down. "You don't have to cook." "I know," she said, "but I want to." Jamie climbed onto the chair opposite him. The boy stared openly now, still cautious, still quiet, but the fear in his eyes had faded just enough to let curiosity in. "Hi," the boy said, barely more than a whisper. Caleb looked at him. "Hi," he replied. It was nothing, but it was everything. By noon, the house didn't feel quite so hollow. Maya was humming again, same soft tune, maybe a lullaby, and Jamie had found a wooden spoon and was tapping it on a metal bowl like a drum. Caleb fixed the back door hinge, then the screen, then the broken window in the pantry. "I'm not sure you remember how to sit down," Maya joked, watching him. "Some things aren't worth remembering," he said. But the truth was, he couldn't sit still. Not with the way the house was, starting to sound like life. Not with the way Jamie's toys were slowly taking up corners. Not with Maya's clothes hanging on the line outside like they belonged. He told himself it was temporary, He told himself it meant nothing. But when he walked past the living room that night and saw Maya curled on the couch, asleep with Jamie, on her chest, moonlight falling gently across them, it felt like a painting someone had stolen from another life. A life he'd buried. And now it was hanging quietly in his hallway. The next day, Caleb started on the shed out back. He hadn't used it in years, not since the storm tore half the roof off and rats moved in. But Maya had asked if there was any space for Jamie to play without worrying about snakes or rusted nails. The shed could be that space, with some work. It wasn't easy. The wood was warped and the rot had spread. But as he worked, he noticed something. His hands remembered. They remembered the rhythm of fixing, the language of hammer and nail, the patience it took to build something that would last. It was almost like muscle memory, as if part of him had been waiting to be useful again. Later that evening, Maya stepped into the shed with 2 lemonades and a towel draped over her shoulder. "You're bleeding," she said gently, nodding toward his forearm. Caleb looked down. "Just a nick, nothing worth mentioning." "I've had worse," he said. "I believe you," she replied, handing him the drink. "Still, let me clean it." She reached for his arm without hesitation. Her fingers were warm, careful, not clinical but kind. She pressed the towel against the cut, her brow furrowed with quiet focus. "You don't have to do that," he murmured. "I know," she said again. They were quiet for a moment. Caleb watched her, the way the late sun caught the amber in her eyes, and he thought, this is what it feels like to be seen, not fixed, not saved, just seen. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Some words weren't ready yet. That night over dinner, 3 plates, 3 chairs, 1 table, they spoke more than usual. Jamie showed Caleb a drawing he'd made. It was simple, a boxy shape meant to be the house, stick figures standing beside it. Maya labeled them Mom and Jamie. The third figure had no label. "He doesn't talk about his dad," Maya said quietly later, when Jamie had gone to bed. "And I don't ask him to." Caleb nodded. He didn't ask questions either. He understood what it meant to build walls around memories. "I think he likes you," she added. "That might be a mistake," Caleb said softly. Maya looked at him, something flickering in her expression. "It might be. But so was staying with a man who hurt us. So was waiting for someone to rescue me. I've made a lot of mistakes, Caleb." He didn't look up. "But this doesn't feel like one." They sat on the porch until the sun gave way to the stars. Caleb rolled a cigarette, but didn't light it. Maya leaned back, her knees pulled to her chest. "You know," she said almost playfully, "you're not as scary as you look." Caleb chuckled under his breath. "I'm worse." She smiled. "I don't think so." The wind picked up, cooler, now. The desert, breathing. The sky wide open. Inside the house, a lamp glowed golden behind the curtain. A home, or something like it. Caleb looked over at her. "What if you stayed longer?" he asked. She turned to face him. Her eyes searched his face, slow and steady. "I'm not running anymore," she said. "Me neither," he whispered. And just like that, the night shifted. Just enough. Not a promise. Not yet. But the first crack of light, beneath a door long closed. The desert changed color at dusk. Not just the sky, which turned gold and violet, but the very air. It grew cooler, quieter, like the world itself was holding its breath. Inside, the little gas station turned home. Everything slowed too. Dinner was done. Dishes washed. Jamie was asleep, curled up with his toy dinosaur, his fingers still wrapped around one of Maya's scarves like it was armor. Caleb sat outside on the front steps, elbows resting on his knees, a mug of tea cooling in his hands. He didn't like tea, but Maya had made it, and he hadn't had the heart to tell her. The porch light buzzed above his head. Behind him, through the screen door, he heard Maya moving in the kitchen, then the sound of it stopping. A pause. Then, her steps coming toward him, soft, deliberate. She sat down beside him, a few inches of wooden step between them. Neither said anything for a while. It was Maya who broke the silence. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb didn't look at her. "You can." "Why here?" she asked. "Of all places you could have gone. Why this?" Caleb let out a long breath. "My dad built this place with his bare hands. He ran it till his last breath. I used to pump gas out front when I was a kid. Took my first kiss behind that shed." He gave a faint smile. "Back then, I thought this place was the center of the universe." She waited. "And after the accident," he said quietly, "I didn't want to be anywhere that didn't already feel like loss." Maya's eyes softened. "You loved them." He nodded once. "I didn't even see the deer. I was too busy trying to calm her down. My wife. She was having contractions. Early. I took a shortcut." His voice caught. He paused. "I told myself I was doing the right thing," he said. "But sometimes, the right thing costs everything." Maya reached over, slowly, and placed her hand on his. She didn't speak, just let it sit there. Light, steady, real, and Caleb didn't pull away. Inside, they sat across from each other at the table, 2 mugs between them, steam curling into the space where grief lived. "I was 23 when I met him," Maya said. "He was older, charming. Everyone said I was lucky." She laughed, low and bitter. "Lucky?" Caleb didn't interrupt. "It started with little things, criticism disguised as care. Who I could see, what I could wear. Then it became bruises, apologies, flowers, silence. The cycle. You've heard it before?" He nodded. "I got out after he hit Jamie." Her eyes flicked up to meet his. "I was willing to be hurt," she said. "But not him. Not my son." Caleb's jaw clenched. "How long have you been running?" he asked. 7 months, she replied. 3 states, 2 shelters, and now here. You think he'll come after you? I know he will." They sat with it, this quiet, terrible knowing, a storm they couldn't see yet but could already feel in the air. Later that night, Caleb stood in the workshop. He ran his hand over the wooden table he'd been repairing, a table that had once belonged to his father. The legs were still, uneven, and the finish had long since faded, but something about it called to him. He didn't know why he'd started fixing it. Maybe because it was broken. Maybe because it still had use. Just like them. He heard a noise and turned. Maya stood in the doorway, wrapped in one of his flannel shirts. Her hair was messy, her face tired. "I couldn't sleep," she said. He nodded. "Me neither." She stepped inside slowly, her bare feet making no sound on the concrete floor. She looked at the table, then at him. "Did you build this?" "My dad did," he replied. "I'm just trying to keep it from falling apart." She ran her fingers over the surface. "Feels like it remembers things." "It does. So do you," she said gently. Caleb swallowed. "I didn't mean to feel safe here," she said. "But I do. And I'm scared of what that means." "I didn't mean to let you in," he admitted. "But you're here, and I'm scared too." Her eyes didn't leave his. "You're not broken, Caleb." "I feel like it," he whispered. "Yeah," she said. "Me too. But maybe broken people can still build something." He looked at her, not the way he usually did, cautious, side-eyed, guarded, but really looked, and for the first time in years he felt seen, not pitied, not forgiven, just understood. He reached out slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She didn't flinch. And for a moment, in that quiet space with no expectations and no promises, they both existed, fully, painfully, beautifully. When she went back to bed, Caleb stayed behind. He sat at the table, put both hands flat on the surface, closed his eyes. The table creaked under his weight, a sound like memory, like something being rebuilt. Outside, the wind picked up again, and he didn't feel alone. In the days that followed, the house began to breathe. It was nothing dramatic. No grand revelations or sudden confessions, just small things, quiet things, like the way the wind softened in the afternoons, or the way Jamie started leaving his toys scattered across the living room without asking permission, or the way Maya hummed as she folded blankets, her voice warmer, steadier now. Caleb noticed them all, and for the first time in a very long while, he didn't want to stop noticing. The shed took shape first. It had been nothing more than a sun-bleached box when he started, half-roofed, half-rotted. But now, thanks to his hands and a little salvaged lumber, it stood like a shelter again. Not perfect, but sound, honest. Maya watched him work from the porch, Jamie balanced on her hip. "You build like someone who doesn't trust shortcuts," she said one afternoon. "Shortcuts don't hold up in a storm," he replied. She smiled. At that. "Neither do most people." Caleb glanced up. "You're still here." "I'm trying," she said. "It's easier when I'm not the only one." That evening, they planted the cactus. Maya had brought it out wrapped in newspaper, the only thing she'd taken from a rest stop 2 states back. It had one long lean stem and a burst of red at the top, like it had been dipped in flame. "I've been carrying this around for months," she said, kneeling by the porch steps. Couldn't explain why. "Looks like hell," Caleb said, crouching beside her. "Yeah," she laughed. "But it survived." She passed him the gloves. Together they dug a shallow bed in the sandy soil near the edge of the porch. Jamie stood beside them, clapping with delight when they set the little cactus in place. "What should we call it?" Maya asked. Jamie thought for a long moment. "Promise," he said. Caleb looked at her. She looked at him, and neither of them said no. Later, in the quiet of the evening, they sat on the porch together, the desert glowing blue under the rising moon. The nights were getting cooler now. Fall was beginning to slip across the land like a hush before sleep. "You're different," Maya said softly. Caleb turned his head. "Then when I met you, you're lighter." He gave a dry chuckle. "You should have seen me before the wait." She looked down at her hands, then at his. "You ever think it's possible," she asked, "to actually start again?" Caleb stared out across the sand. "Some days." "And the rest?" "I survived them," Maya nodded. "Yeah, me too." She leaned her head gently against his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't stiffen, just let it happen. The world felt smaller in that moment, not in a bad way, but like something finally closing in around them that didn't hurt. Shelter. Warmth. Home. Inside, Jamie had made a fort from 2 chairs and a blanket. He declared it a spaceship. Caleb was invited in. He accepted. Together, they sat beneath the makeshift roof, a flashlight between them. Jamie handed Caleb a crayon and a paper plate. "We draw," he instructed. Caleb hadn't drawn anything since he was 12, but he sketched anyway. A truck, a sun, a dog that looked suspiciously like a coyote. Jamie beamed. "You're really good. Your bar's pretty low, kid," Jamie giggled. It was a sound that made Maya pause in the hallway and press her hand over her mouth. She hadn't heard him laugh like that since before they ran. That night after Jamie was asleep and the house had settled into its slow rhythm of creaks and sighs, Maya found Caleb out by the cactus. He was crouched low, one hand gently brushing the dirt back from the base. "It'll need water," he said, without turning. "So do we," she murmured. He stood. They faced each other under the soft light of a single porch bulb. Maya stepped forward. Her voice was barely more than a breath. "I know this isn't forever. I know we haven't said anything, but I want you to know I feel it." Caleb looked at her. "Me too," he said. It was a fragile thing between them. Not a declaration, not a vow, but something truer. Something that didn't need to be spoken in full to be real. And for now, that was enough. But the desert never stays still for long. A truck passed by the next morning. It didn't stop, didn't even slow. But Caleb saw the Dust it kicked up from the window, and the sound it made, too low, too smooth, told him it was new. Not a neighbor, not a delivery, and not lost. He watched the road for a long time after that, then walked out to the edge of the property, eyes narrowing against the sun. He knew the look of a storm brewing, even when it wasn't in the sky. The desert was still. Too still. Caleb felt it before he could name it. That strange, tight feeling in the back of the neck. The way his hands went still even while working. The way birds quieted, as if the land itself was listening for something. The truck hadn't returned. Not yet. But that didn't mean it was gone. That morning, while Maya made breakfast and Jamie played on the floor with a bent Tonka truck, Caleb took a long walk up the ridge behind the station. From there, you could see the whole stretch of road that led in and out. Miles of cracked asphalt, nothing but dust and heat shimmer. He stood still, scanning. Then just before turning back, he saw it. Tracks. Fresh ones. Wide, smooth tire marks pressed into the roadside dirt, just beyond the reach of wind. And a footprint. A boot print. One that didn't belong to him. He crouched and stared at it for a long time. Then he stood and walked back down slower than he'd come. Inside the house, Maya was stirring eggs, but her posture had changed. Shoulders tight. Head tilted slightly, listening for something beneath the normal sounds. "You felt it too," Caleb said. She looked up. "The truck?" He nodded. She turned off the burner. The room went silent. "I saw him once in Arizona," she whispered. "3 weeks ago. I think he saw me too, but he didn't follow. Not then. Maybe he waited." Caleb rubbed his palms together, then leaned on the counter. "You think he's armed?" "I know he is." "You think he'll hurt Jamie?" Her voice dropped. "He already has." That silence came back. Thick. Absolute. Caleb's voice was low and steady. "Then if he comes here, I'll stop him." Maya looked up. Not shocked, not relieved, just tired. "No one's ever said that to me and meant it," she said. "Well," Caleb said, "I don't say much, I don't mean." They spent the rest of the day differently, not tense exactly, but aware. Caleb fixed the latch on the back gate and tested the locks on every window. Maya packed an emergency bag, just in case, and stashed it under the bed. Jamie sensed the change, grew clingier, quieter. He stayed close to his mother, eyes flitting toward the windows. In the afternoon, Caleb taught Jamie how to stack small rocks into a pyramid. "Like a trail marker," he said, "so you always know how to find your way back." Jamie took it seriously. His little hands worked carefully, selecting the smoothest stones. Maya stood on the porch and watched them both. Something about the image struck her, a man teaching a boy how not to get lost. That night, Caleb didn't sleep. He sat by the cactus, promised they'd named it, and watched the horizon. A bottle of warm beer in one hand, a flashlight in the other. He knew the kind of men who used control as a weapon. He'd seen them before when he was younger, wilder, still working at his father's shop. They didn't just show up, they circled. They poisoned the air before stepping in. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that this man, this threat, they weren't just circling anymore. They were coming. Just past midnight, Maya came outside. She had a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and her hair loose, tangled with sleep and worry. "Still nothing?" she asked. He shook his head. "But I can feel it." She sat beside him on the steps. For a while, neither of them said anything. "I used to think running was cowardice," she said. Caleb looked at her. "It's not." "I know that now," she said. "But it doesn't make me any less tired of it." "You're not running anymore," he reminded her. "Then why does it still feel like I could lose everything?" He swallowed hard. "Because you finally have something worth losing again." She rested her head on his shoulder. For the first time, he wrapped his arm around her without hesitation. And they sat like that, two people who hadn't asked for love again but had found the outline of it anyway, in shared fear and fragile hope. "I'm not going to let him near you," Caleb said softly. I'm not going to let him break me again, Maya replied. And between them, the cactus stood still in the moonlight, rooted in desert soil, daring to bloom where nothing else should. The next morning, a note was pinned to the gate. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. You can hide, but you're mine. Always were. Below the message was a single photo, blurry black and white, taken from a distance. It was Jamie, playing by the cactus. Caleb held the note with gloved hands. He read it twice, then burned it. By the time Maya saw his face, she already knew. It started, she whispered. No, Caleb said, his voice like gravel, steady and unflinching. It ends here. The sun hadn't yet risen when Caleb got up and pulled on his boots. The desert was still dark, shadows stretching long over brittle earth. But he wasn't looking at the horizon this time. He was looking inward, at something in himself that had once been brave, once been useful, a man who protected. That man had gone quiet after the accident, gone small. But now, with a threat circling, his home and the sound of Jamie's laughter still lingering in the kitchen tiles, he felt that part stir again, not as fury, but as resolve. Today there would be no running. He checked the locks again, closed the gate, loaded the shotgun he hadn't touched in 3 years and placed it behind the door. Not to kill, he told himself, but to keep alive. Maya was already awake when he came back inside. She stood barefoot in the kitchen, pouring coffee with a calmness that looked borrowed, like she'd worn it too many times to count. He's close, she said. It wasn't a question. Caleb nodded. Jamie sat at the table, drawing. A house, 3 stick figures, a tree with red flowers. He pointed to the tallest figure and said, "That's you." Caleb didn't respond, but something in his throat tightened, something real. The first sign came at noon, a truck on the far ridge. Parked, engine off, then gone. An hour later, footsteps, too far to see but close enough to hear. A bottle clinking, a cigarette lit. By mid-afternoon, a single knock came at the gate. Not rushed, not frantic, just certain. Caleb opened the door slowly. Not wide, just enough to see the man standing at the edge of the yard, taller than Caleb remembered. Broad, clean boots, new sunglasses, casual like someone who knew no one would stop him. He smiled. "Afternoon," the man said. "I believe you've got something of mine." Caleb didn't blink. "You're trespassing." "I'm collecting," the man replied. "My family." "Not anymore." The man took one step closer. "You gonna stop me?" "Yes." That single word hung in the heat like a blade. Maya came, to the doorway then. She didn't flinch, didn't hide. She stood tall. The man's smile faded. "Maya, you know this isn't going to last. You and the boy. You belong with me." Jamie appeared behind her, eyes wide. He clung to her leg. "Get inside," Caleb said, his voice firm. Calm. Maya didn't move. Then the man reached behind his back. In a blink, Caleb was off the porch. He met the man halfway. No words, no hesitation. Just 2 bodies colliding in a swirl of dust and heat. There was no plan. Just instinct. Just love turned to action. The man swung. Caleb ducked. The blow grazed his jaw. Caleb punched back, years of anger stored in the curl of his fist. They fell to the ground, fists flying, knees kicking. Somewhere, a gun clattered onto the dirt. Jamie screamed. Maya shouted his name, and then a crack, a sound like bone splitting, then silence. When Caleb opened his eyes, he was on the ground, dazed, bleeding from his mouth. The man loomed above him, raising the gun again, and Caleb did the only thing he knew to do. He stood, blood on his teeth, legs shaking. He stepped between the man and the house and said, "If you want them, you'll have to kill me first." The man hesitated. Just enough. Then, sirens. 2 of them. Dust exploded as Sheriff Holloway's truck skidded into view, followed by another cruiser. The town's only 2 deputies jumped out, guns drawn. The man dropped the weapon. Caleb didn't move, didn't breathe. Until Jamie ran from the porch, threw his arms around his leg and whispered, "You didn't let him take us." Hours passed. Statements. Medical checks, handcuffs. The man was taken away, still cursing, still threatening. But now, powerless. Maya sat on the porch step, shaking. Caleb knelt beside her, his knuckles torn, a deep bruise blooming along his jaw. But his eyes never left hers. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, tearful. "You stood between us." He swallowed hard. "I didn't the last time," he said. "I swerved, I panicked. I lost everything." She took his hand. "You didn't lose us." Later that night, after the deputies left and the sheriff patted Caleb on the shoulder with quiet respect, the house was still again, but different. Not a silence of grief this time, a silence of survival. A silence that said, "We're still here." Caleb tucked Jamie into bed. The boy clutched his drawing, now crumpled, smeared, but still intact. "That's you," he said again, pointing to the tall figure. Caleb kissed his forehead and walked out of the room with tears in his eyes. Maya stood by the cactus. The sun was low, painting everything in gold and dust. "It bloomed," she said. Caleb followed her gaze. One red flower. Sharp, defiant, alive. "I don't know what this is," she said softly. "Us. This place. But I want to stay." Caleb reached for her hand, held it. "I'm not asking for a promise," he said. She looked up. "Just a choice," he whispered. "One day at a time," and Maya smiled. Not because she was saved, but because she finally felt safe. The fire started just after midnight. No one saw it at first. Not Caleb, who had finally fallen into the first real sleep he'd had in days. Not Maya, who had curled beside Jamie on the cot, still dressed, still waiting for her heart to stop racing. It was the smoke that woke them, thick, acidic, sudden. Caleb sat up, coughing. Maya was already on her feet, scooping Jamie into her arms. Flames licked the ceiling in the back room. The old wiring Caleb had meant to replace one day but never did. He didn't think. He grabbed Maya's arm and pushed her toward the door. "Go!" he shouted. "Now!" Outside, the desert night roared orange behind them. The sky glowed like an open wound. The wind fed the fire, turning sparks into teeth. Maya and Jamie made it to the gate. Caleb turned back. "The shed," he started. But the roof collapsed before he could reach it. By dawn, it was over. The trusses had caved in. The furniture was ash. The kitchen roof gone. Only the front porch remained, blackened but standing, like a ghost of the life they'd started to build. The cactus survived, scorched, singed, but alive. So did the old table, burned on one side, legs warped from heat, but not gone. And so did Caleb sat on a rock, shirtless, his skin raw from smoke and heat. A first aid kit sat unopened beside him. Maya knelt nearby, gently cleaning Jamie's soot-covered cheeks. No one spoke for a long time. Then Maya turned to him, eyes rimmed red. "We were supposed to be safe." Caleb didn't look up. "He's gone," she said. "The man's in custody. You stopped him, so why does it still feel like he won?" Caleb's voice was rough, because fire doesn't care who starts it, it just takes. Sheriff Holloway came by at noon. He didn't bring a squad car, just his own truck and a cooler of water. He stood at the edge of the yard, hat in hand, looking at the charred remains of what had once been a home. "I've seen worse," he said gently. Caleb didn't reply. "I told the folks in town what happened. Told them what you did." That got Caleb's attention. "I didn't do anything special," he muttered. The sheriff smiled. "That's the thing, son. Around here, standing between a kid and danger, that's about as special as it gets." By sunset, people started showing up. First came Mrs. DeWitt from the diner with a basket of cornbread and jam. Then Tom, the old mechanic from Route 60, with a bundle of salvage tools. Then two teenage boys Caleb had never seen before asking where they could help clear debris. No one asked for permission. They just came. Maya watched them, her eyes wide. "You know these people?" she asked. "Barely," Caleb said. "But they showed up." "Yeah," he said quietly. They did. That night they stayed in the shed, the one Caleb had rebuilt for Jamie, ironically the only part of the property untouched by flames. The air still smelled like ash, but there was peace in it too. A strange kind of peace that only comes after surviving what you thought you couldn't. Jamie fell asleep fast, curled up with his crayon drawing now covered in soot and fingerprints but still visible. 3 stick figures, a house, a tree with red on top. Caleb sat at the doorway. Maya joined him. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For the loss. For the trouble. For bringing the storm." "You didn't bring it," Caleb said. "He did, but I let it follow me." He looked at her. "You don't get to carry his sins." She didn't reply, but she leaned against him, and they sat like that for a long while. In the morning, Jamie was the first one out of bed. He ran to "The cactus, it's okay," he shouted back. "It didn't burn." Caleb walked over. Sure enough, Promise stood tall, bent, yes, and blackened in places, but its roots were still firm and its single red bloom held its shape. "I thought it'd be gone," Maya said. Caleb stared at it for a long moment. "Some things," he said, "you just can't kill." They began cleaning that same morning. Ash was everywhere, in their hair, their clothes, their mouths. Caleb cleared the beams with help from the teenagers. Maya wiped soot from what few dishes had survived. Jamie stacked burnt bricks in rows, calling them castles. By midday they were sunburned and aching, but they were working. Together. That night, after washing up with water heated over a propane stove, Maya sat at the base of the cactus. Caleb joined her, sitting in the dirt. "You still think we can build something here?" she asked. He looked at the blackened porch, at the half-gone table, at her. "Yes," he said. She exhaled. A mix of grief and hope. Maybe that's what rebuilding was. "I don't know what to call this," she whispered. Caleb didn't answer right away. He leaned forward and pressed his hand to the soil around the cactus, brushing aside the ash. "You don't have to call it anything," he said. "You just have to stay." She looked at him, and for once, she didn't flinch. By the 3rd day, the ash had settled. The wind no longer carried smoke, and the sky had returned to its endless pale blue. The cactus still stood tall and scorched and stubborn as ever, its bloom beginning to curl but not fall. Caleb stood at the edge of the rubble, hands on his hips, boots planted in soot. He hadn't said it out loud yet. Not to Maya, not to Jamie, not even to himself, but he knew he would rebuild, not just the house, not just the shed. His life, his place, his worth. They started with the floor. Tom, the old mechanic, brought plywood. The teenagers came back with crowbars and gloves. The sheriff drove in a flatbed with bags of concrete someone happened to have lying around. No one asked why. They came, no one needed to. They just showed up, nailing, sanding, lifting, handing Caleb tools like he'd always been theirs. Caleb moved like a man reborn. His muscles ached, his knuckles were raw, and his shoulders bore the weight of every hour. But his steps had purpose. "Where's the center beam going?" one of the boys asked. Caleb tapped the soil with his boot. "Right here." Maya was, watching from a distance, Jamie in her arms. She hadn't spoken much that day, only smiled when the sound of hammering filled the air, like a heartbeat returning to a body that almost gave up. By sunset, the foundation was framed, a skeleton of a home waiting to rise. Caleb stood back and looked at it. He didn't smile, but he didn't feel hollow anymore either. That night, dinner came in the form of 6 pies and 4 casseroles, brought by women Maya had never met, but who hugged her like family. One placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered, He's always been good. Just needed someone to give him a reason again. Maya nearly cried, not because of the words, but because they were said without conditions. Later she found Caleb at the edge of the yard, standing near the cactus with a mug of black coffee. He didn't look up when she approached. "You didn't have to rebuild," she said. "I did." "For Jamie?" He shook his head. "For me," he said. I think I need to prove to myself I can make something that lasts." "You already did," she whispered. He turned to her then. Face weathered, hands rough, eyes steady. "You stayed," he said, as if still surprised. "I chose to," she answered. In the days that followed, the house rose inch by inch, walls, beams, then windows. The porch was last. Caleb saved it for a Sunday, so the whole town could help. They came with drills and lemonade, folding chairs and jokes. Someone brought a speaker and played old country tunes. Jamie danced barefoot in the dust. It wasn't just a rebuild, it was a ritual, a ceremony. Not of religion, but of return. Caleb watched Maya through the window frame, her hair pinned back, her hands painting a board that would one day be Jamie's bedroom wall. She looked like she belonged here, because she did. One evening, Caleb pulled the old table out of the rubble. Burnt on one side, legs warped, surface blistered, but not beyond saving. He sanded it, refinished it, replaced the cracked leg. Jamie helped, handing him nails and giving constant updates. "You're doing good. That part's almost straight. That's my seat right there." When it was done, they placed it in the middle of the new floor, before the roof went up, before the windows came in, a table in an unfinished house. But the moment they sat at it, they were already home. That night, Maya stood at the threshold. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. "What?" Caleb said. "This table. This place. You. Us." He didn't answer. She smiled, stepping closer. "It's not what we lost. It's what we chose to build from the loss." Caleb reached for her hand, resting it over the same spot where his wife's had once rested years ago. But it didn't feel like replacement. It felt like permission. To move forward. They didn't kiss. They didn't have to. Their foreheads touched, and that was enough. Two people, two wounds, one table, and the sound of hammers echoing like hope just outside the door. The cactus bloomed again. No one expected it. Not after the fire. Not after the windstorms. Not after weeks of dust and drought, and everything that could have broken it. But one morning, Jamie ran out onto the porch in his pajamas, barefoot and shouting, "It's back! It's red again!" Caleb and Maya came out together, and there it was. Promise, standing tall at the edge of the yard, spine still scorched in places, bloom bright as blood and sky. A single red flower, defiant and whole. Maya knelt beside it, fingertips brushing the edges. "I thought it was done," she whispered. "It should have been," Caleb said, "but it wasn't." She looked at him. "Neither were we." The house was almost finished. The roof stood firm. The windows framed the golden light of late autumn. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and wood glue. The floors were solid. The front porch wide enough for 3 chairs, one for each of them. The table they'd restored sat in the middle of the room, polished and simple. Scratches still visible, burn marks along the edges, but it held, like them. Jamie had drawn pictures for the walls, rockets and stick families, and a new one he called Our Forever House. Maya framed them all, even the ones that didn't make sense. Caleb no longer counted the years by what he'd lost. He counted days instead. The mornings when Jamie fell asleep against his shoulder without a word. The afternoons when Maya left the window open and hummed while sweeping. The evenings when they sat on the porch drinking tea or saying nothing at all. He'd stopped looking back so often, and when he did, it was with something gentler than guilt. One night, Jamie crawled into Caleb's lap, sleepy-eyed and quiet. "You're not my real dad," he said. voice muffled against his chest. Caleb tensed, unsure what to say. But then Jamie added, "But you're the one who stayed." Caleb wrapped his arms around him and whispered, "That's the only kind I know how to be." And Jamie didn't say anything else, just rested there, safe in a truth no bloodline could define. Later that night, Maya found Caleb out at the cactus again. He was sitting in the dirt, knees drawn up, staring at the bloom like it held some kind of answer. She sat beside him. "I've been thinking," she said. "We don't have to name this." "This?" he asked. "What we are, what we mean, what comes next." Caleb turned to her. "Okay. But if we did," she added, "I think I'd call it a life we chose. Not the one we planned, not the one we lost, the one we decided to keep building." He reached for her hand. "I can work with that," he said. The town gathered a week later. Nothing formal, just tables pulled into the yard, jars of lemonade, pies, laughter. Jamie played tag with the sheriff's granddaughter. Maya sat with Mrs. DeWitt, sharing stories about things they were finally ready to say aloud. And Caleb? He stood at the grill, apron covered in flour, flipping burgers and watching it all. Not guarding it, just living in it. When the last guests left and the stars came out, Caleb stood alone in the doorway. Behind him, Maya was humming in the kitchen. Jamie's laughter echoed from the bedroom. He looked out at the cactus. The bloom swayed, slightly in the breeze, catching the moonlight just right, and for the first time Caleb whispered it, out loud, to no one. Home. Not a place. Not four walls. A decision. A choice. A daily one. As he stepped back inside, Maya met him at the table. She reached out and placed her hand over his. No vows, no plans, no speech. Just this. We don't have to promise. Forever. He nodded. But we can choose each other, she said, again tomorrow. He smiled, eyes stinging a little. Let's. The wind rose gently outside. The cactus stood strong. The table waited for morning. And in the quiet warmth of a house built from fire, grief, love, and choice, a family stayed. Sometimes healing doesn't come with a miracle. It comes with a choice. To stay, to rebuild, to love, one quiet day at a time. If this story stayed with you, let your heart stay a little longer. Like, subscribe, and walk with us, where every story is a step toward home.